Hi, everyone. Oh, hi, guys. I'm not sure if I'm live or not. I'm just going to check my settings. Okay. What are you doing? Coming back here. Oh, okay, whatever. Testing. Okay. Says we need the YouTube live URL. That's what I gave it to her. Hi, guys. So it says that I am now live. So if you can see and hear me, I see in the chat I'm called support. rather than Mary. So if you can see and hear me, let me know. And I think no, it's an online. Okay, we'll get there. It's taking me a little while to get started here on Zoom. On the webinar. I'm not quite sure. Okay, Stacy says she can hear and see me. So I'm going to guess you all can, but why don't you just type real quick and let me know that's the case. We do know, because we ran a little test on this, that there is a delay on the message. So when you, oh, Ginny says see and hear, great. When you type, when I say something and then you hear it and then you respond and type, there's all kinds of delays. So we'll just juggle all this. It'll be fun. So far, I see a few people here. I see Teresa, I see Ginny, I see Paramita, I see Anastasia. So hi guys, so delighted to see you here. So far, almost completely people I know. So that's really nice. And we did have a lot of signups from people I don't know. So we'll probably have some of those people joining us too, which is very awesome. And welcome. So let's just get started here a little bit in terms of getting ready for our work together. Okay, I've got to get my screen sorted out. You know, I got my notes and the screen with my face on it and the chat. So hold on, I'm juggling panels. Oh gosh, it's so funny to do all of this. All right, and then my notes on the right. Let me close that. Let me close this. There we go. Okay, I see everything at once. All right. Great. Okay, we're ready to go. So as we're getting started here, I know some of you have already commented in the chat, whether you can see or hear, but feel free to say hi and introduce yourselves. That's where I should look to see you guys. And introduce yourselves if you feel like it. And also, you might want to go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pen. Or open a little note in your computer if you prefer to do it that way. I do it in my computer in two ways that sync with my phone, and then I can check my notes and update them later. So, but I'm a real geek, you know, I've loved. So if you're a pen and paper gal, get out a pen and paper, or guy. And so, as we get started here, let me just note that this is a workshop on self-sabotage. And therefore, I think it's a pretty good bet that everybody who came has some kind of relationship to self-sabotage. And so if you want, if you're here and you have decided to be here, I want you to know that that's already a step toward freedom, because there are lots of people who try self-sabotage, sorry, I'm getting distracted by the notes. Stacy, by the way, is my wonderful assistant, and I'm going to, Stacy, let you keep track of the chat, okay? And I'm going to just stay recording and doing the class and let you guys take care of that. And then I'll check in with the chat when I'm ready to look for the answers to questions, okay? Otherwise, I get a little ADD. So, okay, so you're here for a reason. And I want you to know that stepping up for this is a step toward empowerment, because a lot of people self sabotage, but they don't really claim it. They blame others, right? And there's a sort of hierarchy of responsibility, and blaming others is the least responsible thing. And then we step up to acknowledging we self sabotage, and then we might start blaming ourselves. And that's the next level of empowerment. And it's not actually where we want to get to. And today we're going to talk about where we want to get to, which is being responsible instead of blaming. So we're going to work on the distinction between responsibility and blame. Okay. But you're here, and that means you had the courage and honesty to step up and say, all right, let me grab a hold of this. So I really want to acknowledge that, first of all. So let me applaud you for your courage and your honesty. And taking responsibility for your action is for your actions is a really powerful step. So you're here for a reason, and you know what it is. Let me invite you to bring to mind why you're here. So let me invite you to bring to mind something in your life that you would like to do differently, but habits of self-sabotage have gotten in your way. So just anything at all, and it could be several somethings. And as we are doing this, hold on, I'm going to check into the chat because I'm seeing a lot of notes. Let me just check in with Stacy separately. Oh, Tanya got it. Okay, people got it. All right, I am going to trust this is working. It's tricky to do the juggling of the tech and the teaching. Easier in person, right? Let's all get together. Let's get together in a really nice resort. Okay, so so I was just saying, let me invite you to bring to mind something in your life that you would like to do differently, that you want to change, but you have noticed that you self-sabotage about, okay? So anything at all that you want to accomplish, and so go ahead and write that in your notes, either on your page or in your typing that you are doing on your computer or your phone. Write it down. And so what we're looking at is here things that you would do if you could find a way to stop all self-sabotaging behavior. Any changes at all. And they could be really small or they could be really big. You know, like it could be as simple as taking a dance class, or it could be as big as launching an online business or a performance career as a singer or whatever. Okay. So whatever it is, just write it down. Things you would do different in your life if you could find a way to stop all self-sabotaging behavior. And as we're working together, you might think of other things to add to that. So feel free to add to it as thoughts come up. And then if this is something that you'd be willing to share in the chat, if it doesn't feel too vulnerable or personal, go ahead and share with us something you would do differently, something you would launch or you would change or you would end or you would start or you would modify or you would learn if you knew you could stop all self-sabotaging behavior. Okay? So I'm just going to look over to the chat to see where we are. Okay, I'm going to trust that everybody's okay. Actually, everybody who's on, just type if you can hear and see, or type that you can, because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to hear me say that. All right. Now, let's just note some of the ways that you have been sabotaging these desires or hopes or dreams, okay? So it could be that with some, you've never gotten started. With others, you tried it for a while, but you gave up. With others, it could be that you started, but you just are kind of procrastinating on taking the next step. Another way we self-sabotage is we make what we would call dumb mistakes, right? Mistakes you know better, and then you make it, and maybe you make it again. And then maybe you make it again. So maybe you talk to people about it who you know are going to shoot your dreams down, right? Like maybe you call that sibling or that parent or that friend who, you know, you just know they're not going to say, yes, I believe in you, you can do it. So you talk to naysayers. Maybe you make a mistake or fail, and then you beat yourself up and you use that to prevent yourself from starting again, trying again. So what we're doing is we're writing down some of the ways you have sabotaged your already existing desires and goals and dreams. Maybe you have some unique ways. My experience is that when I really have tried to do something that falls into the areas that I am most scared of and self-sabotage around, if I try and push forward on it, I will go to extremes to make it not work. I will pick a fight with someone. And I'm pretty nice, but I'll pick a fight with them, or I will get really emotional and cry. And so there's all kinds of ways that we might self-sabotage, okay? And again, any of these that you're comfortable enough to share in the comments, go ahead and share them in the comments. So Ginny's offering some, thank you. I stay up till 11-ish, get hungry at 10. I'm socializing with the hubby, but how not to snack without going to bed. And I still want to keep him company. Right. That's a perfect example. And Stacy says she would like to learn guitar. And unfortunately, Anna said, I'm giving up, doesn't work, try a different browser. All right, Anna, we will send you the replay. So hopefully the replay will work for you. Technology, huh? Right. So we can see that our self-sabotaging behaviors are specific to the thing we want to do, right? So as Ginny's example is very specific to the thing she wants to do, the self-sabotaging behaviors like staying up too late and eating in the middle of the night and stuff. So, okay. So look at your list now of the things you do. And as you look at it, just notice how that list makes you feel. So reading those things generates a feeling within you, and see if you can put a name on some of those feelings. And again, if you're willing, share them in the chat. You will not be the only one feeling these feelings. I see Stacy saying, that's what I would do if I could try anything. So Stacy, we're going to get you playing the guitar. I'm putting that on my list. So some of the feelings that I know people feel when you look at these ways you self-sabotage are things like feel kind of ashamed of yourself, or frustrated, or angry at yourself. Maybe you even feel hopeless, like, oh, I've tried this so many times and it doesn't seem to make a difference. Maybe you feel pathetic, like, God, I'm such a pathetic loser. I remember one time I was trying something really hard. I was really trying to change my whole life. And, and Teresa says, makes you feel tired, discouraged. Yes. I was trying to change my whole life, and I was really pushing myself, and I wasn't being very successful, but I wasn't giving up. But I remember talking to my friend Virginia, who's a really good friend of mine, and I said, God, I feel like such a pathetic loser. And she said to me, I don't see a pathetic loser. I see a courageous person who's trying to do something no one else has ever done before and follow her dreams. And oh my God, those words sustained me so many times. So, you know, when we're trying and we're doing something difficult, that's exactly when all this comes up. So Tanya says, I don't know what I'm doing to sabotage myself, but I'm noticing that things come to be, but then slip away. Okay, so with Tanya, there's a kind of slipping away stuff. Oh, and it looks like Tally couldn't get on the call either. So Stacy, would you mind making a note that Anna and Tally couldn't get on the call, and we want to make sure we reach out to them with the replay. Okay. So yeah, so a bunch of different things, and the tiredness, right? That fatigue, like, oh gosh. All right, so now that we've gotten ourselves all depressed, let's just do a state change, okay? So you might want to do this. If you're alone and you have enough privacy, you know, stretch. Maybe move your arms around, shoulders back, shake your head. Maybe even stretch your face out. Maybe scratch your head, mess up your hair, and fix your hair to make it look good again. And if you can't do any of those things, I'm going to give you another thing you can do. So maybe you're at the office and you can't do any of those things. So if you can't, and even if you can, put your feet flat on the floor, sit up a little straighter, shoulders back. So your feet are flat on the floor, you're supported, your posture's a little better. Deep breaths. And now we're going to use the next 3 exhalations to release into gravity on each exhalation. So take a breath and release. You don't have to collapse, but just release. Take a breath, release. Take a breath, release. Okay. So as we were doing that, did you notice that it didn't feel good, that the feelings got sort of present? And as we start to feel those feelings like ashamed, angry at ourselves, hopeless, pathetic, et cetera, we get less and less empowered feeling, more and more overwhelmed, and less likely to do what we want to do. All right. So now, having established that for ourselves, and I'm sure a few of you experienced that, I'm just going to check in with the chat one more time. Teresa says, I let that slip away too. Right. Okay, great. So we can see commonalities arising, right? Okay. So after several people asked me, what do I do about self-sabotage? I decided it would be a good thing to create a webinar that people could then refer to, and I could just offer to people, and we could connect more and do a little back and forth and figure it out. So here we are. And while I was getting ready to do it, I asked myself, what can I offer in essentially a 1-hour webinar? I'm going to try and just talk for no more than 50 minutes if I even do that much. And then we'll do 10 minutes of Q&A. I don't want to make everyone's day long here. What can I offer on a 1-hour webinar that would actually help? Right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the world. We tried a million things. So what can actually help? And so as I thought about it more, I thought about tips, and suggestions and strategies, blah, blah, blah. I realized it would be a total waste of your time if I gave you tips about how to stop self-sabotage, because, we've all read those articles or watched those videos, the 3 things or the 5 things or the 10 things that you need to do to be happy, or you need to do to stop procrastinating or whatever, right? Those articles are everywhere. And the suggestions are good. It's just reading the articles is not effective, because while those things would help, in order to make them work, you actually have to do them. And not only that, since the topic is to avoid self-sabotage, then the nature of this is, even if I gave you like the best tool in the world that I knew would work, and you even tried it, because the issue is self-sabotage, chances are almost all of us would find a way to sabotage it. That's just how it works. So instead, I asked myself why some of us sabotage ourselves in the first place. And what I really got to is this feeling sense that is connected. And I thought, where do these feelings come from? So I want to offer an important context here. I have a lot of years of working directly with people and working with them long enough to see what works and doesn't work. And I don't want to exactly brag, but I think it is useful for me to tell you that in my career, I have heard numerous times something along the lines of, wow, this is the first time therapy has worked for me. Or, wow, this is the first time I feel like I really get it, like I'm able to start making these changes. And this is because I'm able to work with people and we try stuff. And if it doesn't work, we tweak it. And if it doesn't work, we tweak it. And so everything I'm telling you has been tried out, not just for myself, which would be some information, but with other people too. And I think it's important for you to understand this, because there's a lot of people out there now in the internet telling us a lot of things. But if they haven't actually tried them out with other people and seen what really works, they really don't know. And, I'm fairly smart and I have tried plenty of things that did not work. So we really don't know what will work until we try it. So it felt really clear to me that 5 brilliant tips weren't going to work. We would need to address these feelings we've talked about earlier and how they make you feel more disempowered and make it less likely you'll do that thing that benefits you and moves you towards what you want towards what you prefer. So I'm just going to check in with the chat. Let me know if this is resonating with you. Someone has joined us, Padma, hi. So the main feeling I would like to talk about today is one that kind of pervades all the others and underlies all the others and paralyzes us a lot. And that is the feeling of shame. Ashamed, kind of not being good enough. Shame is really tricky. It's a feeling that you are somehow bad because of what just happened. Right? So Ginny was courageous enough to share that thing about staying up at night. And, you know, when you think about that, chances are you feel just sort of like not good. Like I'm sort of bad. Like maybe I'm dumb, or maybe I'm lazy, or maybe and so shame takes this feeling and turns it into an internal kind of self-blame. And remember, we talked earlier about the levels of empowerment. So blaming others is really disempowered. That's seriously victim mode. So even stepping into self-blame is more empowered, but it isn't quite empowered enough to make a difference because the blame makes you feel bad. So there's this cycle of bad feeling generated by all this. Okay? So shame is very, 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 very tricky. Shame is also completely illogical. You can feel it either mildly, intensely, whenever you do something that triggers it. And here's the really crazy part. For people who have habitually sabotaged ourselves, shame is a feeling that can be triggered by almost anything. It can be triggered by not doing something you said you do, but it can also be triggered by accomplishment. And that's really messed up. That's a place that gets very confusing for us. All right, checking in with the chat again. All right, good. So I'm just going to give you a quick example from my own life on this. When I was a kid, I was one of those really bright but disorganized students, right? So I had a lot of facility in learning. I was good at things like memorizing quickly and taking tests and giving oral reports. I could do that. Like, you give me data, I feed it back in the way you want and get an A. I was one of those, right? Annoying, right? But I was also kind of all over the place, and I couldn't keep track of things, and I lost things all the time, and couldn't really prioritize. I'm still this way, by the way. It's just sort of my nature. I think now they might label it something, but honestly, I don't think it needs a label. I think it's pretty normal and human. So I had times when I did really well in school, getting super high grades with ease, and other times when I just completely messed up. And the most obvious example for me was in 10th grade. I had a class with Mr. Jesse. I loved Mr. Jesse. I went to a pretty cool school, and we had an English class that would focus only on Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in 10th grade. It was a good school. They were very special. I loved that class. I'm definitely a geek. I've always been a geek, and I loved the Middle English, and I loved the memorization, and I was doing really great in it. At some point, maybe 2/3 of the way through the semester, Mr. Jesse told me he had nominated me for the English award that year, and I was really excited by that. And then toward the end of the exam semester, he gave us a take-home exam. And this is classic downfall for me, that if I'd had to go in and show up and just do it, I would have totally done it. But because I had to do it at home, I kind of forgot, and I kind of blew it off. And anyway, bottom line, I never did it. And then I ran into Mr. Jesse at the award ceremony, hadn't even really put this together. And he said, "I failed you. You didn't turn in your final." And so I went from being nominated from the award to failing. So this was the kind of like weird self-sabotaging behavior I did. And one of the things that I learned over time is that of course, I felt deeply ashamed of myself. But I realized over time that I also felt ashamed at doing really well. In fact, even today, as I've been talking about it, when I said really annoying, right? You can see it still sneaks into my language, this sort of shame at being good at things. And once you have learned shame, it just takes over. It just becomes something that's kind of a habitual behavior. And so anyone who can identify with this at all, please let me know. Disorganized can totally relate. Yep. And Teresa, is there a feeling of shame associated with being disorganized? And anyone else, a feeling of shame associated with whatever it is about you, like maybe like the wanting to learn to play guitar, and you could do it, or you should do it, or maybe the eating at night, or whatever it is. So I'm just curious if this is resonating for you guys. So whatever the activation of feeling, I want to tell you a really important thing. That is a conditioned response. That is something you got trained into by the experiences of your life. And maybe you know where that came from. Maybe you had a caretaker of some kind who was really shaming, but maybe you don't know. And it's okay if you don't know, because one of the things we do with children is we try and control them, and people who are not very skillful at motivating children will use shame to control them all the time. And we all do this. I've seen myself do it. So that is one of the challenges. And so we kind of get it too, right? If you're a parent or a teacher with a lot of kids moving around and you basically need to control them, you want them basically to conform to what you want. You aren't really interested in what they want. And so this you are really, of course, but you can't be in the moment. So what we try and do is we control children. And of course that makes sense, but we're not children anymore. Now we're adults. We have to actually reconnect with our own preferences and our own inner guidance. But this conditioning has done stuff to us that makes us feel embarrassed, or fear of being criticized, or fear of upsetting other people. And all of this comes in to sabotage us when we try and do something that takes us out of our normal behaviors. So this is all tied to self-sabotage. So shame at doing well, yes, and being disorganized, both, right? I figured you probably could identify with that. And one of the curses of being good at anything is that often people will shame you for being a show-off or something like that. So, all right. So now here we are, we're an adult, and this conditioning is still playing out. But now you're the boss of you. You're the one who gets to choose, and in fact has to choose. There's no other choice. So when we choose behaviors that are sabotaging to ourselves, there's conditioning underneath it that is undermining us. And that condition makes us feel kind of terrible. It says something like this: well, that's stupid. Right? Like, for example, Stacy wants to play the guitar. Now, I'm not saying you're saying this, and we're definitely going to get you playing guitar. I've got my ukuleles in the corner. I want to spend more time. Maybe we'll create a little mini team on that. But let's say you do, and you're busy, and you have responsibilities, and some part of you says, oh, that's just stupid. What a waste of time. You're never going to be any good. I mean, who do you think, blah, 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 right? It might do that. Or it might say, that's selfish. You have other people to look after. You have responsibilities. So your conditioning will use these feelings to undermine you taking steps. So we can see how the conditioning and the feelings play out in myriad ways that undermine our ability to do the things we want to do. So again, even if I came up with 5 great tools, as you used them, if they were doing stuff that was moving you out of what people call your comfort zone, which is not comfortable at all, by the way. We should really call it the waiting room. Picture it like a bus waiting room where you're kind of waiting for life to happen. It's not comfortable at all. It's uncomfortable, but it's not a stretch, right? So as you do things, this conditioning will come up and cause feelings that are liable to make you stop. So what we really need to do is come up with ways to address the feelings. Is this all making sense to you? Type in the chat if this is making sense to you. Yes, resonating, Stacy says. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to give you 5 things, because I promised, but they're not going to be 5 tips. They're going to be 5 learnings that we're going to note, we're going to name, and then what I'm going to tell you is you're going to continue to cycle through these. The way we learn things is we try something, and then later we come around and we try it again and we have a little more insight. Now the thing is, it's not a circle, it's actually a spiral. that we try these 5 things and we go around, we try them again and we try them again. And as we continue to do it, our understanding deepens. So we get deeper and deeper and our understanding deepens. So these are 5 things that you can return to again and again and again, literally on a day-to-day or moment-by-moment basis that will support you in stepping into whatever the next choice for you is that will support what you want to have happen, i.e. stop self-sabotaging, or more accurately, move toward what you want, okay? So it's 12:34. I think we're kind of on track, so this isn't going to be too endless. Okay, so I'm looking at the comments here. Ginny says, I want to keep hubby company and happy. Dad critical of mom of her weight. Thinking of trying to make a dad, or in this case, hubby, makes me anxious, so I feel hungry, self-sabotage. Exactly. That is a perfect example, thank you, Ginny, of the cycle that we get into. So on the one hand, you want to make him happy, but then you've got this thing with the weight, there's critical of, and so thinking of trying to please someone, which we're going to get to in just a minute here, the futility of that, makes you anxious, and then the anxiousness makes you want to soothe yourself, and you know that you will feel soothed, and you will, with your particular soothing technique of food, so you do, and then it feels like self-sabotage. So that's a perfect example. We're always, by the way, a point I should really note here is self-sabotage almost always has to do with soothing feelings that are upsetting. So that's we're gonna talk about that in here. All right. So these 5 steps that I'm gonna tell you are, again, not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and you're done. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, or 1, 3, 4, 2, 1. So this is just a deepening understanding. Step 1 does actually always have to be right up front. And that is honor your preferences. Honor your preferences. Now, we got a lot of shoulds in our lives, and they're not just going to disappear overnight. But the shoulds are different from preferences. And I like to refer to these as preferences because, like, sometimes we'll talk about wants or needs, but that can get a little tricky. Like, for example, you call it a need, like I need rest, or I need solitude, or I need food to calm myself. And then it's like, well, is that really a need? Is it a need? And of course, you don't need other people to question and criticize you. You've internalized that quite nicely, right? So needs are tricky, like prove you need that. So, there are needs, right? We're going to need to keep breathing. In fact, I kind of need a sip of my coffee because my mouth is dry. So I'm definitely not saying needs don't exist. I'm just saying that's not the word I choose here because it's a little wobbly. Then wants are also tricky because when you want something, it usually means it's out there, meaning it's in the future. I want it. And why do I want it? Because I don't have it. So what I'm really experiencing in the present is the lack of it. So what I'm experiencing is the lack of it, and I've got some sense of future wanting of it. So it's actually kind of about lack and disempowerment. But preference is a little different. Preference is right now, what do I prefer? Now, just to be clear, in the moment of feeling agitated, if you have a habit of reaching for food or reaching for booze or reaching for a cigarette or reaching for Netflix, that was headphones, or a podcast or whatever to soothe you, your preference will be for that. So I'm not saying this is like an automatic, like fix you thing, but your real preference is something else. And as you train yourself to listen not to your shoulds, but to your preferences, you will be able to move more and more and more in the direction of, in this moment, choosing your real preference. So we're going to talk about soothing too. So we're getting to that. But just to be clear, preferences. So your preferences matter. And I'd like you to begin to consider owning that word. Owning the word preference, like I prefer this. One of my beautiful friends, her name's Karen, and she was really a dear friend of mine from college. So we've been friends for a million years. And she grew up with a lot of shoulds. And at some point, she started to really reclaim her preferences. And she had to do this over a period of a couple of years, really training herself in the face of other people wanting her to do other things. And she came up with this phrase for herself where she said, people say, do this. So can you do this for me? And she would say no. And they go, oh, I really need you to do this. And she came up with this phrase where she would say, I'm just not willing. I'm like, can't argue with that. You're just not willing. And say, why not? Well, I'm just not willing. And she just stuck to it. She used that phrase, I would say, for a good year before she really started to embody the power to choose what she wanted. So we find our way. Okay. So honor your preferences. We need to cultivate a sort of sense of self-respect. You are truly unique. You really do have a magic that is all your own. You have something completely unique to offer this world. And if that feels like too much pressure, let me just also note that you just have a simple right to follow your preferences and your bliss. Everything living does this. Your cat does, your dog does. They don't question, is it okay if I want this? They just want it. An earthworm does, a lion does, a tree does. They move toward the light. They reach roots out for the water, a tomato plant. Everything does. It is a natural thing that a living being has an urge to move towards what it wants and desires and prefers. And only we human beings second guess this desire because of our conditioning. So you're just going to have to take my word on this for a little while, that this is not going to turn you into some kind of terrible hedonist. It's not going to turn you into a greedy, nasty person. It will help you be a person who understands the balance of your wants and needs in others. So honoring your preferences. It's an essential part of moving towards what you want. And the reason, or one reason for that, is because self-discipline, which is what most people think of when they think about self-sabotage. I need self-discipline. Self-discipline is not going to work to overcome self-sabotage. You cannot beat yourself into stopping self-sabotage. You cannot discipline yourself into it. But what you can do is notice what you want and be willing to put effort toward it. So, when people talk about self-discipline, they point to great star athletes, or they point to anyone who's accomplished anything, musicians. I want to tell you, I've been doing this work a long time. It's not that there isn't discipline in it. It's just that it isn't discipline. It's joy. It's delight. You don't need to tell a basketball player, go through, shoot some more baskets. I don't need to tell a musician or an artist, go do your work. Now, I'm not saying that musicians and artists don't do that. And maybe even athletes once you reach a certain point. But what I will tell you is that won't last. People who do that, they burn out. I've seen so many musicians and fine artists burn out. When you use discipline to try and make yourself do something, it's a very limited kind of energy. But when you follow your own preferences, when you're moving in the direction of your delight, then you have a chance to reconnect with natural learning, the way kids do while they're learning to walk. Kids don't second guess themselves. They try and get up, they fall. They try and get up, they fall. They try and get up, they fall. They try and get up. Whoa, they got their balance, they fall. Right? They don't go, oh, I'm such a failure. They just keep trying. And anyone who's really successful has some of that in them. Entrepreneurs, the same way. They're not busting their butt to work hard. They might be working hard, but they're excited, or they're going to be burned out soon. There's really only two ways on that. Okay? So that's the first thing. Honor your preferences and let them guide you. The second thing, so that's number one. The second thing is you got to stop beating yourself up. Now, that's really tricky because the conditioning to beat yourself up is going to be pretty strong. So as you're doing it, as you are doing whatever you're doing and you do something wrong, you will probably beat yourself up. So the first step is actually to not stop beating yourself up because you can't, because it's a habit. When I keep doing this, stands for neurons that fire together, wire together. And what we know from neurobiology now, and from fMRIs and watching, people learn neuroplasticity is a pretty new concept, by the way. Even 20 years ago, people were saying brain cells don't regenerate. You might have grown up hearing that. You can't grow new brain cells. Well, it's nonsense. They regenerate all the time. And so if you still have that lie in the back of your mind, it wasn't a lie, it was probably just a mistake. It's not true. We've got tons of evidence of neurons constantly connecting to create new neuronal networks. And so here's one neuronal network, one set of neurons in the brain. Here's another set of neurons in the brain. And what happens if they fire at the same time? They wire together. Neurons that fire together wire together. So that's when I keep doing this. That's what I'm talking about. And so what's happened is you have beating yourself up wired to all kinds of things, because that's happened in the past, and now that will just be a reaction. If you think about it, it's just like anything else. If there's something you're afraid of, you have fear associated with a thing, when you see that thing, it'll generate fear. And even if, like, say you have fear of dogs because you were bitten by a dog, and you look at a dog and it's sleeping over in its bed in the corner and it's not even looking at you, nonetheless, because of this connection, the dog will trigger fear in you. And it's just how it is. But these can be separated too. They are constantly being formed and reformed. And so here we are saying, here I am saying, stop beating yourself up, but you have all these connections. So the first step is actually stop beating yourself up for beating yourself up. Now, this might sound a little convoluted, but it's actually a really important key. I'm just going to check the chat. So it hasn't updated recently. Let me know if there's anything that's coming up for you. There are questions that are arising, and I'll be addressing them. Okay. So because you have conditioning and you have developed habits of beating yourself up and feeling ashamed and telling yourself you're dumb or you're stupid or you're lazy or whatever it is for self-sabotage, for doing stuff that isn't beneficial, the first step you have to do is say, oh, okay, I'm beating myself up. I'm beating myself up. And then you can use what I like to call the 3 magic words. Okay, got it. You notice that you're doing it. Now, you know, because I just told you that you came by that honestly, it's conditioning. This happens, I beat myself up. This happens, I beat myself up. And by the way, these are like Christmas tree lights, right? If you plug 2 Christmas tree lights together, if you light this one lights. It's non-optional, right? They're connected. So for now, you're going to do something and you're going to beat yourself up. You're going to think something and you're going to beat yourself up. But what you can do is you can say, oh, got it. I'm beating myself up. There's my conditioning. Then you use the 3 magic words, okay, got it. And then you stick your feet on the floor like we just did. You take a breath and you say, okay, I'm doing that thing. Now, as you did it, it'll have activated feelings. Remember those feelings. And if you were to check, you'll notice shame, exhaustion, fatigue, hopelessness, embarrassment, all the things we talked about. You'll notice those feelings are present, and they will absolutely feed in to make you feel worse and to beat yourself up more, to do the thing, to self-sabotage more, to do the thing that you always do, the eating of the food or the avoiding of the whatever, okay? So you've got to learn to deal with your strong feelings. And that's the first clue, is to say, oh, got it. I'm doing that thing. Feel on the floor, give yourself a chance to settle. You will settle, by the way, if you let yourself. You really, really will. Although it might be hard to believe at first. Okay. So number 1 was honor your preferences. Number 2, stop beating yourself up for beating yourself up. Okay. Eventually you'll get to stop beating yourself up. That will change to a different number 2. But right now, that's it. Stop beating yourself up for beating yourself up. Okay. Number 3, take responsibility for yourself, but not for how others perceive you. So this speaks to what Jenny mentioned earlier, right? You know, So you know that your habits and behavior are conditioned response because we just talked about that. And so it is, of course, your responsibility to find ways to modify them, but it is not your fault that you have them. That's beyond your control. That's in the past, and you're just that way at this point, and it changes. These are constantly forming and reforming, okay? So we're opening up to a new possibility, and the step is to distinguish between blaming yourself and taking responsibility. So taking responsibility sounds like, oh, I see I'm like that. Okay, let me see what I can do to step into a new response to it. That's responsibility, the ability to respond. Okay? Now, you can't take responsibility for other people's feelings or opinions or perceptions. You just can't. You cannot make other people happy or unhappy. In fact, maybe you know this. Maybe you already know you've got someone in your life, no matter what you do, you cannot make them happy, right? You can't make an unhappy person happy. And you can't make a happy person unhappy. A person who's really like good, you try and like rain on their parade. They're like, oh, okay, well, don't know why you're like that, but I think I'm going to head out. You can't actually make anyone feel anything. Now, I'm not saying you won't influence them and they won't blame you for how they feel, but no one can make us feel anything, and we can't make anyone else feel anything. We must take responsibility for our own feelings, but we can't take them for others. So you can try and make others happy or unhappy, and you can totally bend yourself into a pretzel to please them and try and get their behavior to change. But two major fatal flaws in that plan are, first of all, there's usually more than one person. So already you've got differing opinions about what you should do, right? So you're not going to win there. And the second thing, as we said, you can't make someone feel anything. So this is not about being unkind or not caring for others. It's just understanding you really can't control them. But as long as you're trying to, you'll get caught in this loop of thinking they should be making you happy. So we've got to free ourselves from that and say, I am responsible for me. I am responsible for my happiness and my well-being, and I am not responsible for your happiness and your well-being. So this is a really big learning, but it's really key to doing this thing that will allow you to move forward. Because if you want to do something that is going to break the mold a little bit, there are going to be people who have opinions about it. All right. So that's actually going to come up in number 5 a little bit too. But that's really important. Take responsibility for yourself, but not for how others perceive you. Okay. Number 4, you got to reframe failure. All right. Failure is something that we who have learned to sabotage ourselves feel really terrible about. But I'd like to try and describe this comic to you. I tried to find it somewhere. It's on the web. We'll find it. One of us will find it. We'll share it, okay? The comic had blocks of squares falling on a guy, and each one was labeled failure, failure, failure. And the guy was kind of cowering on the ground. And he was covered in a pile of blocks. Each one was labeled failure. And then the next cartoon was the same guy and the same blocks, but what he was doing was he was stacking them up like this. So here, 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 and he was creating a staircase to walk up. And so that's what failure really is. And again, if we come back to the basketball players or the entrepreneurs or the little child, the natural learning process is loaded with failure, right? Basketball players, every single one of them has had gazillions of missed baskets. Little children learning to walk, every single one of them has fallen over and over and over again. Entrepreneurs who are massively successful, every single one of them has launched something that didn't work, has tried something that didn't work, has tried to create a product that didn't sell, okay? So loaded with failure. Life is loaded with failure. Failure is only failure if you don't understand what it's for. What it's for is just to give you clues about how to correct. So we take our failures and we stack them up and we use them as stairs. It's really important. Now, for those of us who criticize ourselves, that is not what we do with failures. Okay? Failure becomes evidence for how we're no good, or how we're not going to do it, or how it was a waste of time, or whatever. So we must reframe failure. All right? And then number 5 is you must create, and you got to do this, a community of support. So there are going to be a lot of people in your life who are kind of like naysayers, and there are a lot of people in your life who are supporters. And you have to create a community of support that will help you do the thing you want to do. And there's a bunch of ways to do that, but you must be conscious about it, because otherwise there'll be that person who's been in your life for years and years and years and years and years, who tends to make you feel bad, who tends to make you feel like you can't do it, and you'll keep interacting with them. And maybe they're your parent or your spouse or your kid or your brother or your whatever, and you're not going to stop interacting with them. But what I am going to say is you need to be very careful to not share your hopes and dreams with those people. Do not share your hopes and dreams with people who are focused on finding ways to tell you you're wrong. Share your hopes and dreams only with people who are focused on making their own hopes and dreams come true, who are like, oh, wow, that's great that you're going for that, who have some desire for themselves. Do not let someone who has given up on their own dream convince you to give up on yours. So you've got to create a community of people somehow. You can find them online. You can find them in groups. Among your circle of friends, there's those 2 who are supportive and those 2 who are not. So make sure you talk to the first 2 about your hopes and dreams. The other thing for community support is you really need to get some mentorship. And I'm just going to say this very clearly. I have gotten mentorship all along the way. And in fact, I still do. I still get mentorship all the time. I have a number of people with whom I have mentorship roles, and we interact in specific ways regularly. And so this is going to lead me into what I would like to offer you here. Okay, I want to mention a new program, not new actually, new-ish, that we are offering starting on April 6th. And this is a way for you to get community and mentorship that will support you in taking the steps towards your dreams. It's called the 21-Day Empowerment Challenge. And remember how we talked about how those feelings relate to your empowerment? So those feelings of like shame or hopelessness or weakness contributed to a feeling of disempowerment. And in that feeling of disempowerment, we don't take the steps that we could take. But as we understand better how where we place our focus affects our feeling of empowerment, we step into it. But this is something that takes a little while to learn, right? Like the spiral, it takes a little while to go through. So for the last 20 years, I've been working on finding ways to help people take these kinds of steps. And I've worked individually with people, and that's kind of great because we can focus. But the problem is, it's really quite expensive. And 2, there's only 1 of me, so I can't work with that many people. So for the past year, I've been developing this online course, the 21-Day Challenge. And my thinking was this: 21 days is very limited, right? It's just enough time to really focus some energy and get some things moving. And so I thought, let's give it a try. We've already done it twice in the last 12 months, and we're doing it again. And actually, probably 2/3 of the people who are already signed up for it at this point are people who did it before. And the reason why, it's been great. And so the 21-Day Challenge is a way to jumpstart the kind of energetic shift that you need in order to begin to free yourself from self-sabotage. So to take these 5 steps and practice them over and over and over again. Practice honoring your preferences and listening to yourself. Practice stopping beating yourself up. You're doing it, so you stop beating yourself up for being, oh, I see, got it. Practicing stepping into responsibility for making a choice. Practicing reframing failure. Oh, God, I did that thing again. Hold on. I can reframe this. What have I learned? And practicing getting the support from a community. And as we practice, we get better and better and better and better and better at doing the things that we want. So the 21-day challenge gives you a jump start. And then I will tell you also, there's another thing, a kind of a longevity piece that we need. And I actually had a dream of creating a longevity support too. So the 21-day jump starts you, and then you need that longevity support. And I knew that if it's going to be something that people really get support for a long time, it's going to need to be very affordable. My goal was actually to make it the price of a cup of coffee, and not, by the way, like a triple whatever latte vanilla frappuccino $12 coffee, but just a regular coffee. And so I actually also have launched that this year. Now, right now, the 21 days is a prerequisite to that, because you actually got to get yourself going a little bit. You got to kick up the momentum a little bit, and it's fun. So don't feel too bad about that. But the second program is called Continuum, and allows us to see the continuum of growth that gradually leads to a great life. So these two things together create both the immediate jumpstart and the long-term support that you will need to get started and to continue to create what you want and to overcome your habits of self-sabotage. So if you want, actually, hold on, there's a little button I'm supposed to push here. Where is the button? That's not it. Here we go. Okay. I know it takes a little while. Oops, that wasn't it. Hold on. There we go. It takes a little while for that to pop up, but you'll see a button that shows up below that says how to find out more information. So just click on the button. It'll take you to a page with a ton of information. But I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how it will work. So on August 6th, April 6th, we're going to launch the 21-day challenge. And that day we'll have a live communication where we'll be together in a Facebook group, and we will be communicating. It goes much smoother than this, I promise you. And we'll launch the challenge, and I'll give you some frameworks to get started, and then challenge number 1. And then challenge number 1 we'll get started on, and then we have 3 days to practice what I call acing it. And acing it stands for this. A stands for accomplishment, C stands for celebrate, and E stands for encouragement. So accomplishment, celebration, and encouragement. In the group, we'll accomplish it, we'll say, yes, I did it, and then we'll encourage one another to keep going or to celebrate, to feel good. So this is how we will overcome some of the procrastination type stuff. And then on the day 4, we'll have the second challenge, 3 more ACE days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? At day 5, I can't remember the days. So this is a process that we've gone through that is super fun and super empowering. And at the end of it, you will have accomplished all these cool things that you'll have had a lot of fun in, and you'll see very clearly the connection between the practices and what your feeling of empowerment and what you're able to do in your life. So on the page, by the way, there's a ton of testimonials from people who did it in the last 2 challenges, just literally this year, this 12-month year, and what they truly experienced. It's fun and it's wonderful. And as I said, most of the people who signed up early actually are people who've done it before because they felt so rewarded. Some of those are also in the Continuum program because, as I said, I made that ongoing and super affordable. So if after the 21-day challenge, you're inspired to get more support, it's available. And the cost for that, by the way, is $40 a month. And so really the cost of a cup of coffee, it's like $1.20 a day or something. So, so these are 2 programs that you can find out more about by just clicking on that button. Okay, so now I hope the button is live. That's the theory. And now I'm going to take a bunch of questions, and let me go ahead and set myself up to be able to hear your questions. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna change to that, and Okay, now I'm going to go into the chat and have a look at what the questions are. Um, Hold on. Sorry about the delay. I'm not very... How do you deal with people feeling jealous of your ability to do well? Would you please repeat the first point? Okay, I got 2 questions there. So just turning down the heat there. Okay. So Paramita, let me answer your question first. So how would I please repeat the first point? And so the first point I think you're talking about honoring your preferences. So first of all, just to be clear, this is recorded. I'm going to send you a link to the recording so you can go back and check it out. But the first point of honoring your preferences is simply that. That's got to be the starting point for anything that is sustainable. Because if you try and discipline yourself and you aren't listening to your preferences, you will be doing stuff that does not feel good and you won't sustain it. You might stick it out for a month or even a year sometimes, but ultimately it will exhaust you and wear you out. The other thing too is you won't find your way gradually forward through the step-by-step inner guidance. So that's honoring your preferences is the first point. And Teresa says, how do you deal with people feeling jealous of your ability to do well? Okay, so that's a really good question. First of all, let's be really clear. This falls absolutely in the category you can't be responsible for others' feelings. So the first part is you must know that their jealousy has nothing to do with you. Like, it just doesn't. Their jealousy just has literally nothing to do with you. They want to make it about you doing well. They want to, but it isn't about you doing well. It is about them not doing well. Because a person who was really enjoying themselves and accomplishing what they wanted to do, they would not be focused on you doing well in a jealous way. If anything, they would be focused on you doing well in like, how can I steal your good ideas way? You know what I mean? They'd be like, oh my gosh, you made that work. So the first thing to know is you cannot be responsible for their jealousy. You did not create it and it has nothing really to do with you. However, what you're asking is, how do you deal with that? And so what you actually have to deal with first is your feelings about it. So you see there's layers here. There's you doing well. There's their reaction to you doing well, right? And then there's your reaction to their doing well. And that's the part that you have some control over. And that's the part where you might need to first stop beating yourself up for beating yourself up. Right? So I say this to you, and then you might go to a place of saying, okay, Mary was right. Let's just imagine. Mary was right, and I'm not responsible for their feelings, but I still feel guilty. Why am I like that? So now you see what you're doing is beating yourself up for feeling guilty. So the first thing you do is stop beating yourself up for beating yourself up. So you go, oh, okay, got it. I'm beating myself up. Got it. You see, we have to work at this outermost layer. We can't change we don't want to change what we did, right? We want to do well. We can't change their jealousy. That's their problem. We can't actually change our reaction to their jealousy because that's that conditioning. Then we might, in addition, beat ourselves up for having that reaction. But that's the moment when we begin to step into power. We go, oh, I'm beating myself up for my conditioning. I'm beating myself up for feeling guilty that I'm doing well when they're not. I'm beating myself up, or I'm feeling guilty and that feels bad. So the first step is to say, okay, got it. Okay, got it. So in a way, while your question says, how do you deal with people feeling jealous of your ability to do well? The people's jealousy is not your problem. It is your response to their jealousy. So the real question is, how do I deal with my feelings? Tell me if that makes sense, Teresa. And Paramita, I see. Thank you. You're logging off. 10:36 in my part of the world. Paramita's in India, so long time, a long way off there. So, what other questions do people have? Okay, just replying to something. Let me actually take a simpler thing, right? Like so there's the sort of, Teresa says, totally makes sense. Thanks. Does creative block come from not honoring our preferences? Absolutely. 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 Let me say that again. Yes. Creative block comes from not honoring our preferences. Oh, good, Jenny. I'll be getting to your thing too. So creative block absolutely comes from not honoring your preferences. Sorry, I'm just communicating with Stacy offline there. So let me just tell her. Okay. Live stuff, right? Oh, good. Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. These come in sort of slowly. So here's how that kind of works. Not honoring your preferences is probably a very long-standing habit for almost all of us, right? It took me so long. I'll tell you a little story. When I was first beginning to change this, I'm going to come back online here and take that card down. I'll put it back up in the end because apparently I've got to do that for the webinar to end, but I'm going to come back online here for a minute. Okay, am I back? Guys. So when I was first learning how to really getting it, that I had totally lost track with my preferences. It's not like I didn't do some, I did, but for the most part, it was always tinged with others' approval, which is all about their preference, not mine, right? As I became more and more aware of this, it became weird to me how out of touch I was with them. And I remember this one moment very vividly. I was probably around 30 at the time, and I was living in Brooklyn, New York. I remember very well, I was on my way to a meeting with something or other. I don't recall what. And I got a message on my phone or something back in the day, probably a flip phone, right? That said it was canceled. Or maybe I got a phone call that said it was canceled. And in that moment, I thought, oh, great. And I immediately jumped to something I needed to do, some work I needed to do. I was kind of workaholic back then, by the way, real workaholic. I was a television editor and I worked literally sometimes 20-hour days, which is crazy. But it was not uncommon in that business. And so I immediately jumped to, and I thought, I'll go do this, some chore. Maybe I'll go to the store, whatever. And this is what I remember. I was on my phone. I thought, okay, I'll go. And I did this thing where I stopped. And I was like, wait, what do I want to do? And I had actually stepped down off the curb between two parked cars to go do this thing I should do on total automatic pilot. And I stood there between the two parked cars, and I kid you not, I went, it was like a cartoon. I was like, what do I want? What do I want? And I was sort of trying to figure out how to figure out what I wanted. I didn't even know how to figure it out. And in that moment, it was very clear to me that what I wanted was so far below all the list of things I should do. It was going to take me some simmering down and quiet to get to it. So for most of us, we have a very long-standing relationship with not really honoring our preferences. Okay, so it's just something to know. Does creative block come from that? So yeah, so how it comes from that is all of this stuff gets layered in. All this stuff gets layered in. There's a million shoulds. There's a million feelings of shame. There's a million feelings of failure. There's a million feelings of disappointing others. There's a million feelings of their jealousy. And slowly what happens is that natural spark of spontaneity. It's like, oh, I'll draw that. Oh, I'll make that. Oh, you know, when I was a kid as a musician, I'm also a musician, I just loved making music. People would say, sing, I'd sing. When I got older, I would say to people, you know, I'm warning you, if you ask me to sing, I will. So don't say it thinking I'm going to go, oh, no, I'll sing. So then, though, all the stuff came in. So I hope that helps a lot, Teresa, in terms of how honoring our preferences undermines our creative flow and becomes a creative block. So then Ginny says, insight. I don't want to watch the TV he does. I like his company. I wish I wouldn't need to watch TV. I will get him headphones, I guess. Okay, so great. That's a good step, and you'll see how that goes. Now, here's the thing. Let's remember, if that doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you failed. It just means you take that failure as a stepping stone to the next step, right? So if the headphones don't work, then you figure out another thing, okay? Um, and Jenny says, here in retirement land, I found quite a few couples whose hubbies haven't cultivated many hobbies. Therefore, the wife feels to keep him happy, she's got to find married couple things to do. It's rather pervasive. Yes. So today I'm relearning I'm not responsible for another's happiness. Yes. And the nice thing is when you stop being sort of the concierge, the cruise concierge, like, let's do this fun stuff. And you're actually like, okay, honey, well, you didn't seem to enjoy that very much. So I'm going to go off and do this fun thing with my friend or by myself. I don't know about you, but I love being by myself. The gap for him will actually make him wake up a little bit more to his desires. But that's his job, not yours. I'm just saying that there'll be a payoff for him too. Okay, so then Tanya says, so Teresa, great. I'm glad that was helpful. Tanya says, I wanted a romantic relationship and created it. And now I find myself in a predicament on following my own path. So I'm going to infer from that. And once you add stuff, if I'm inferring incorrectly, okay? I'm going to infer from that you are finding your own path conflicts with the desires of this other person. I'm going to infer that. And yeah, so this is for sure tricky. And as you guys, many of you know, I'm married and I'm married to a very headstrong person. We have a dog rescue, and the dog rescue is actually her thing. And so the two of us are both very focused on creating lives that have very little to do with one another. And that, so I really get the predicament. And the thing is, it's really only a predicament, such a good word, predicament. It's really only a predicament if you have this sort of belief that somehow you can't follow your own path and have it work out. And the other person might also have that belief, but it really only takes one person to say, you know what? That isn't the case. The great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, he does this thing where he teaches about non-duality, that the idea is that we think my happiness is something that negatively affects your happiness, that we have a duality. But in fact, your happiness contains the happiness of the others around you. That when you really listen to your own preferences, and I mean really listen to them, you will find, you will find that they include others' preferences, meaning it's not that I don't care about you and your preferences, but if I will honor mine, sort of the same way Ginny was saying about she's going to honor what she wants to do, what will happen is in the following of that, I will create a situation that allows the other person to honor theirs in a way that doesn't negatively impact me. Now, this might not sound logical, but it is in fact how it works. So Tanya, I don't know if that is helpful at all or if you'd like to elaborate on it. I do notice it's 1:18, so I totally didn't keep my promise to only do 50 minutes of talking and then Q&A, but here we are. And so whatever time it is where you are. And let's see. Okay, so if anyone has any more questions, let me know. But meanwhile, I'm going to put that card up again because the way the webinar works is we notice that it doesn't turn off right away when I'm done. So let me put that card up again. That's with this whole delay thing. And there we have it. And I'm just going to check the feed one more time to see if we have any more questions. Okay, I think we're good. So thank you, gals, for your participation here. Or guys and gals, hello. Thank you for your participation here. And if you have any questions about the 21-day challenge, feel free to write to us. You'll find the email address on that page, and meaning the page that you click the button. You'll also find details about how the challenge works, more testimonials, as I mentioned, and also information about the scholarship program for anyone who is afraid they can't afford it. And I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. So thank you. Reach out to us. If you go to our website, you will see that there's also a way that you can join our online community. And that's ongoing totally free on Facebook. We have a group called Blissipline. And let's stay connected. And as more questions come up, feel free to post them in Blissipline, because I do answer questions there too. And in fact, someone did email me with questions, and now I can't remember what I did with them. So I will answer that in Blissipline too. All right, my friends, thank you so much for our time together. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for participating. Okay, till soon, I hope.